Hello everyone, this is Yubel Master, aka 38 the Master 1 here, bringing you a Yubel deck profile for Edison format. So before we get into the profile, this is actually my first video, so I thought I'd just start with an introduction for myself. So I just got back into Yu-Gi-Oh after a long time of not playing. Last time I played was around Pepe format, and this was like just before Link Monsters were announced, so that's about 7 years ago since I last played. I used to play both in Edison and Hat formats, kind of around that era, and everything in between as well, and pretty much exclusively played Yubel decks because I was just in love with the character back then. So I have a lot of hours of theory crafting and time playing the deck. So back when I used to make these decks, I filled it with a lot of tech cards such as Sacred Phoenix. I usually used Level Eaters or Treeborn Frogs to summon it. Sometimes I ran Caius in the deck as well. You know, I was a younger player and didn't really know any better. So even though I wasn't playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I was still playing other card games such as Shadowverse. And I was actually playing Shadowverse to a very high level, even topping a European tournament once. 10 years of card game experience later, and right here is my refined version of the Yubel deck that I built when I just got back into the game. So yeah, I built this about a month ago. I've been tweaking it ever since. And yeah, when I got back into Yu-Gi-Oh, it was really nice to discover that people still play the format that I used to play in. It made things a lot less overwhelming for me, just knowing that I could just play Edison format and play against Light Swarms and all the other archetypes that I was so familiar with, instead of trying out any new decks. Just rebuild my old Yubel deck. So yeah, that's what I did. And here it is. I truly believe that Edison format is actually one of the formats where Yubel isn't too weak, because Yubel has never got any support over the years. No support that actually makes the deck viable in any way. It's always been one of these jank, below rogue decks, because of how hard it is to summon and how hard it is to use. And it doesn't even do any damage on its own apart from the third form. So just to preface this deck profile, this deck is still jank even in Edison format, but it is probably the strongest it ever was because it's early days. And the power creep of the game hasn't really overshadowed Yubel too much. So I did actually bring this deck to HRC Series 1 tournament, which is from the Edison.com Discord. Although I didn't win many games, I was lucky enough to win one on stream.
And this is a Yubel on the board. That's crazy. I've never seen a Yubel deck in Edison before. Alright, so Dark Tinker. I don't think I've seen this card before either. I'll just show the game, I guess. Also, game 3. We see Dark Armor and a yugioh. Seems like a Vio Turbo deck. It's a little more usual. Silent Doom, special summoning something from the graveyard. Bottomless on that Doom Shaman. That is a Gemini monster, alright. Doesn't have its effect yet. The Master Judgmenting that. Alright. Going down to 1200. If it's face of attack position, battles an opponent's monster. Inflict damage equal to that monster's attack to your opponent. Also destroy that monster. Alright. Dark Tinker. And that is a tuner to synchro summon till level 8. The Blackroot Drago. Well, we've seen this in the Gemini deck, so that's going to summon back a Gemini monster when it is destroyed. But it can miss the timing. It probably doesn't have a Gemini monster in the hand. Otherwise, destroying that back row can be great. But that's a ton of damage incoming, so let's see if Crazy J can pull this back with anything. That Yubel Ultimate Nightmare is an ultimate nightmare to deal with, though, because if they attack it, it just deals damage back. And cannot be destroyed by battle either, so it needs to be something like an effect of Caius or Dark End or stuff like that to destroy this thing. Mills 3 with the Card Trooper, Mills a Soul Release Caius and Draco. Still not enough if there is a Pot of Avarice in hand or set. Banishing a Light and a Dark has Chaos Sorcerer. Alright, so that at least deals with either of these monsters, but not both. So what do they have? Alright, banishing the Brute Drago. Can they do anything on the follow-up? And if that back row is nothing, if the Master top decks something, they can switch the Ultimate Nightmare into attack position, attack into the Sorcerer, deal 2300, then need to just deal 1300 over this Card Trooper to have game. Might be something that's the situation, because they are attacking the Scale Sorcerer. I don't think it's destroyed though, is it? Oh, also destroy that monster. Alright, yes it does. So summoning back Black Brute Drago with that return. Attacking over the Card Trooper. If this is not stopped and it does connect, it's just GG. And I think that's the round. Yeah, that is the round. Alright, GG's. Interesting match. Very interesting deck. I'd love to see what this deck is looking like after the tournament is over.
So yeah, there's the clip. I was very proud of that, especially when the camera was just on me just as I was winning, so that was awesome. Yeah, when I built this deck, I basically cut out all of the random tech cards that I used to throw in it 10 years ago. Just to show you how much I cut, here's the very last build of my deck before I stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I found this in my old collection, literally still in the deck box, and I put it on Dueling Book here for you guys to see. And as you can see, we have multiple copies of brick cards like Doom Shaman and Terra Incarnate, which don't do anything in the hand. But I simply ran multiple copies of these purely because they always got banished by like Bottomless Trap Hole or Archias. So when I recreated this deck, I basically cut out as much as I could from everything that's inconsistent, because I knew that consistency is key when building decks that are competitive. I basically cut out as much as I could and maximized as much as possible on getting Yubel and Doom Shaman in the graveyard to get my deck rolling. Rolling in quotation mark, because this deck doesn't really get rolling, it just gets kind of alive. Anyway, by cutting down on late game and damage dealing cards, which only really work when you've got stuff set up, I just focus on the setup and nothing else. So for those of you that don't understand, I can quickly go over what Yubel does and the strategy of the deck in general. To start off, let's talk about Yubel. So Yubel comes in 3 forms, and each one floats into the next. The first one, Yubel, right here, reads, "This card cannot be destroyed by battle. You take no battle damage from battles involving this card. Before damage calculation, whenever this face-up attack position card is attacked by an opponent's monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the monster's attack. During your end phase, you have to tribute one other monster or destroy this card. When this card is destroyed except by its own effect, its owner can special summon one Terra Incarnate from the hand, deck, or graveyard." Basically, all of the Yubel effects have this first effect of this card cannot be destroyed by battle, and you take no battle damage. If it's in attack position, it reflects the attack of the enemy. The first 2 forms have an end phase effect. So this end phase effect requires it to tribute one other monster to keep it on the field. If you don't tribute, then you have to destroy itself and you don't get the effect. But if it's destroyed in any other way, and this includes being destroyed in the deck or in the hand, then you get to summon the second form. And the second form reads, "Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by Yubel, and cannot be special summoned other ways. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. You take no battle damage from battles involving this card. Before damage calculation, when this face-up attack position card is attacked by an opponent's monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack." So same as the first form. "And during your end phase, destroy all other monsters on the field." So that's the end phase effect. When this face-up card leaves the field, so not just destroyed this time, when this face-up card leaves the field, you can special summon one Yubel, the Ultimate Nightmare, from your hand, deck, or graveyard. That's the second form. It's basically, during the end phase, it's a dark hole except itself. Here we go, the final form. Yubel, the Ultimate Nightmare, cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by Yubel Terra Incarnate, and cannot be special summoned other ways. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. You take no battle damage from battles involving this card. At the end of the damage step, if this face-up attack position card battles an opponent's monster, so you can attack and get the effect, inflict damage equal to that monster's attack to your opponent, also destroy that monster. So basically the third form is now no longer has an end phase effect, but it's now a much more offensive card, because you can actually attack with it and still get the effect. And even if the enemy monster's in defense position or attack position, it still just deals damage equal to that monster's attack, and it also destroys it as well, so you can start eating through monsters. That's the Yubel forms in a nutshell. The first form, you don't want to stay on the field, because otherwise you'll be tributing monsters for nothing, and it doesn't really do any damage itself or deal with any of your opponent's monsters. You want to go to the second form as soon as possible, otherwise you'll be tributing monsters every turn. Because no one would attack the monster unless they haven't read the card, which is funny, and that happens a lot for people who've never seen the card before. They just attack into it and then they receive damage. But usually only happens on card simulators and stuff like Master Duel or Yugioh Pro or something. So the end phase Dark Hole is the main way that I use the Yubel forms, because I use that Dark Hole effect just to eat through my opponent's resources, and if they summon or set a monster, then it gets destroyed during my end phase, and if they don't, then I can attack directly with something. The second form is pretty much the best form because it has something to float into if they do get rid of it, and also it destroys everything during each of my end phases. The third form is the best form hypothetically, but once it gets destroyed or outed in any way, then it's gone for good. So the playstyle of the deck that I play is sit on Terra Incarnate and build the rest of my deck around having Terra Incarnate on the field. Usually modern builds of the Yubel deck is running cards that can't be destroyed by card effects, such as BL's King of Diabolic Dragons or whatever it's called. In order to get out the second form and not stay on the first form for too long, I use Doom Shaman, which I think is the best way to guarantee getting out the second form every time you summon Yubel, and not having to sit on Yubel and waste your resources just to keep it on the field. Because you're not going to rely on your opponent to destroy Yubel. You have to destroy Yubel yourself, because they're just going to wait for it to destroy itself and wait for you to run out of tribute fodder instead. Or they're just going to banish it, or they're going to use a card that can make it miss timing, because Yubel can actually miss timing. If they flip a Raikou, in Edison format specifically, because in Edison the effects aren't simultaneous, they're actually sequential, something as simple as Raikou can just make Yubel miss the timing, and that just sucks. Doom Shaman, what it does is it's a Gemini monster, which means it's treated as a normal monster in the graveyard or in the deck or anything, which is important. You can normal summon it to gain the effect, and you don't need to tribute something if it's already on the field to the Gemini normal summon. Once per turn, you can special summon one Fiend-type monster from your hand or either graveyard. When this card leaves the field, destroy all Fiend-type monsters special summoned by this effect. So yeah, you can basically summon Yubel from the graveyard or your hand if you accidentally drew it, and when Doom Shaman leaves the field, it actually destroys Yubel, which triggers Yubel's effect. So Yubel tributes a monster during each of the end phases, so you just tribute Doom Shaman, and Doom Shaman just destroys Yubel in return. So Doom Shaman is just like a one-card route to get to the second form instantly. So Doom Shaman is pretty much the best way to summon Yubel, and there are loads of other spell cards and stuff which summon normal monsters from the graveyard for free. Now that you know how the general strategy works, let's get into the deck profiles. We run one of each form, because I used to run more than one, but drawing them is just a brick, so you want to carry as little bricks as possible in your deck. Same with Doom Shaman, one of those, and Dark Tinker, which is a Fiend-type tuner, which means it can be summoned by Doom Shaman. So if you already have Yubel on the field, you can summon Doom Shaman and normal summon it, then use the effect to summon Dark Tinker for a free level 8 synchro with one spell card. And then we have all of the cards that put these 3 cards in the grave. So these are our 3 targets for putting them in the graveyard. We need Yubel in the grave, we need Doom Shaman in the grave, and we need Dark Tinker in the grave. So we have, for that, Foolish Burial, and we have 3 Armageddon Knights and 3 Dark Greffers. For the longest time, I used to run 2 Dark Greffers because I thought it was inconsistent when you don't have a Dark in hand to discard it. But even if you don't have a Dark in hand, it's worth holding the Dark Greffer because you just need Yubel and Doom Shaman and Dark Tinker in the graveyard. Because if you don't have them in the graveyard, then all of the other spells that you have in the deck just don't work. It's essential to have as many copies as possible, even if you don't have a second Dark to discard. Because eventually you draw that second Dark and then you can get going. We have Reinforcement of the Army as another copy of the Dumping Knights. We have Sangan to either search for the Armageddon Knight, or if you've already got going, then it can search the Inaba White Rabbit. We have Summoner Monk. Summoner Monk you have to pitch a spell card, but it's worth it if you don't draw anything else. And also in the late game, you can always discard it for Dark Grapher or something. Summoner Monk is just there as an extra consistency. And Mystic Tomato, for some reason, I didn't used to run this in my deck, probably because it's like, oh, it only triggers its effect when it's destroyed by battle, and when you have Terra Incarnate on the field, it doesn't trigger the effect. But this is not to combo with Terra Incarnate, this is to get the engine going. So you usually Mystic Tomato into an Armageddon Knight. We don't actually Mystic Tomato into Yubel, because Mystic Tomatoing into Yubel risks Yubel getting banished or something, and also when Yubel is on the field, you can't summon it from the graveyard to guarantee getting out the second form. So if you summon it and you have to wait to the end phase for it to destroy itself to get it in the graveyard, and then you have to wait the next turn to then use Swing of Memories to get it out and stuff like that. So it's just a way better to Mystic Tomato into Armageddon Knight to get Yubel in the graveyard. And Mystic Tomato is very good at adding that consistency to the dumping strategy. The next two are damaging cards that I use as a quote-unquote win condition, but it's a very weak win condition nonetheless. But it's the best we've got because the deck space for cards that deal damage is very, very small. Yubel White Rabbit is a spirit monster, so it returns to the hand during each of the end phase, and it's just a 700 attack monster that can attack directly. Simple. So you use this whenever you don't have a normal summon in your hand, and you just normal summon it, deal 700 damage, and it doesn't get destroyed by Terra Incarnate, so you can just keep on using it over and over again. So it's just a little bit of chip damage to deal with your opponent. And the Calculator, it gains 300 attack for the level of all face-up monsters on the field. It includes itself, so it has 600 attack by itself. And if you have level 10 monster, for example, like Yubel, well, really, most of the time you have Terra Incarnate, so this has 3,900 attack by default. And if your opponent doesn't have a monster, you're pretty much dealing half of their life points in one attack. So the Calculator is really good, but any more copies than one and it just becomes inconsistent, because this is a combo card, basically. And the next 10 cards are just loads of different ways to summon Yubel. Limit Reverse doesn't actually need Doom Shaman. Limit Reverse reads, target one monster with 1000 attack or less in your graveyard, special summon it in attack position. If the target is changed to defense position, destroy it. That's the key. And when this card leaves the field, destroy the target. Activate this on your opponent's end phase and summon Yubel, and then during your main phase, just change Yubel to defense position, and Limit Reverse just destroys Yubel for you. So you go straight to the second form. And you can also chain, just like with Call of the Haunted, you can do this as well. You can chain it to MST. If they MST your back row, you chain this. Limit Reverse resolves first and summons Yubel, and then MST destroys Limit Reverse, and Limit Reverse destroys Yubel, and then Yubel gets the effect to summon the second form. Call of the Haunted, you usually use this to get out Doom Shaman, but you can also chain it to MST. You can also use, if you don't have Doom Shaman in the graveyard, you can use Call of the Haunted and activate your own Heavy Storm or Giant Trunade. You can do the same with Limit Reverse if you want to. And we have Swing of Memories and Silent Doom, which both summon a normal monster, the target being Doom Shaman. And another thing to note is that when you summon Doom Shaman, you also have the option of summoning Dark Tinker to get a level 8 Synchro. You can do this when you already have Terra Incarnate on the field and you want to deal some damage. We'll get into Synchros later on, but you have some options to go into. So next we have Gauze. This is a Edison staple, but it also works well in this deck because it's a Fiend, so it can actually be summoned by Doom Shaman for a total of 5,100 damage if they both can attack directly. We also have Tragogia, another Edison staple, and it's also a Fiend as well, so it can be summoned by Doom Shaman. We have Giant Trunade to bounce back Call of the Haunted and Limit Reverses. One thing to note is that when you activate Call of the Haunted on Doom Shaman and Doom Shaman gets tributed by Yubel, the Call of the Haunted stays on the field because Doom Shaman isn't destroyed, it was tributed. So you can actually reuse Call of the Haunted if the situation arises. We have Torrential Tribute. Not only is Torrential Tribute a good staple, but it's also a way of getting out the second form if you Mystic Tomato into Yubel. Compulsory Evac is also a good staple against Synchro decks, and Stardust Dragon is actually one of the banes of this Yubel deck, so this is kind of like an out to Stardust Dragon. We don't have much space for Edison staples, so the best Edison staple is Solemn Judgment, so we run one of those. In the main deck, I have 3 Imperial Iron Walls. This is actually a new addition. When I first made this deck a month ago, I used to run 2 Golden Sarcophagus and 1 Allure of Darkness. But then I decided to replace those 3 with Imperial Iron Walls because they kind of clash. and I wanted Imperial Iron Wall in the main deck instead of the side deck, because after playing that HRC series tournament, I realized everyone runs Dimensional Prison, Bottomless Trap Hole, DD Crows in the side deck, and Caius's, everyone runs Caius. So if ever they activate those, just flip Imperial Iron Wall. And also Imperial Iron Wall is a good floodgate against some decks like Vayu Turbo, and it also stopped Allure of Darkness from ever being activated. Imperial Iron Wall in the main deck is kind of a necessity for Yubel, because Yubel does not like getting banished because everything summons from the graveyard. Let's get into the extra deck here. We have 3 black Brutrego. This is a synchro for a Gemini monster. Once per turn, you can send 1 Gemini monster from your hand to the graveyard to select and destroy 1 spell trap card your opponent controls. It doesn't really come up because Doom Shaman's always in the graveyard and you only have 1 of them, but it's a nice bonus just in case Doom Shaman gets bounced or something. When this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can select 1 Gemini monster in your graveyard and special summon it. The special summon Gemini monster gains its effect. So this basically floats back into Doom Shaman for next turn. So during the end phase, when Terra Incarnate wipes the field and destroys Brutrego, it floats back into Doom Shaman and you can summon Yubel or Dark Tinker next turn again. If they don't destroy Doom Shaman, you can literally synchro into another black Brutrego the next turn. So it's kind of the closest thing we have to BLs without actually being BLs. And in some ways, it's actually better than BLs, because BLs has not been released at the time of the Edison format, so we can't actually use that. We have Dark End Dragon. It's really good, and we use Dark Monsters, so we can get it out. Stardust Dragon, I used to only run 1 copy because I used to think it wasn't good, but then I realized you can actually negate your own effect with Terra Incarnate and then get out Ultimate Nightmare. And a board with Stardust Dragon plus Ultimate Nightmare is pretty good, but it's also a little bit risky because they might get rid of the Ultimate Nightmare. You have to have follow-up after that in case they out your board. We have Thought Ruler Archfiend for life point gain, and we have Red Dragon Archfiend, which doesn't really come up very often, but in case you need to destroy defense position monsters for some reason, I don't know. We have Colossal Fighter, sometimes with Armageddon Knights and Grappers in the graveyard, this can go over 3,000 and might end up being a little bit more damage than your other options. Tempest Magician, Goyo Guardian, and Brionac for level 6 options, although it is very rare that you level 6 synchro, because most of the time you're summoning Dark Tinker, it will be via Doom Shaman's effect. But it does sometimes happen when you turn 1 normal summon a knight and then turn 2 normal summon Dark Tinker because it just so happens to be in your hand. The side deck, Burial from the Different Dimension and Return from the Different Dimension for Macrocosmos hate. We have Legendary Jujutsu Master for Gladiator Beast hate. We have Raiko for very rare situations where you have to out a Floodgate, and the only way you can out it is by monster effects. We have Twister and MST to out Spell and Trap card Floodgates. We have Mask of Restrict to counter Monarchs and also Hero Beat. And we have Gozen Match because the entire deck is dark, apart from the extra deck. Yeah, there we go. That's the deck profile. What do you guys think? If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And I will be constantly updating this and taking this to Edison tournaments because I do love the format. And it is my favorite way of playing Yubel currently. So thanks for watching, guys. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Yeah, this was my first video. Welcome all to the channel, and thanks for watching. See you guys.